Shipping companies are avoiding the Red Sea route due to increased attacks by Yemen-based Houthi rebels on ships with links to Israel. Britain, Germany, Norway and Belgium suspended transit yesterday. This as the group is threatening to step up attacks in a show of support for Hamas and Palestinians more broadly as Israel continues its military offensive in Gaza. It's after the attacks launched by Hamas on southern Israel on October 7th, which left 1,200 people dead and over 240 taken captive. Nearly 20,000 Palestinians have since been killed in the Israeli bombing campaign in Gaza. The Houthis have repeatedly warned that vessels en route to Israel are at risk, irrespective of where the vessels come from. Meanwhile, vessel tracking data has revealed that some commercial ships sailing through the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden have armed guards on board. A number of container ships are anchored in the Red Sea, while others have turned off their tracking systems. Well, shipping and maritime expert Brian Ingpen joins us now to talk more about the situation. And Brian, we've brought you in tonight because much of the traffic that we're seeing by the shipping companies will be diverted through the African continent, the Cape of Good Hope, which is very close to us. How will it all work?
Good evening, Michele. Yes, it's going to be interesting to see how many ships actually divert. Some ships approaching the area, either from the north or from the Indian Ocean, will be perhaps slow steaming and hoping to delay their arrival in the area, and again hoping that the situation may fizzle out, or that there are sufficient warships in the area to escort them through. But there are certainly some ships diverting. The exact volume of shipping is unknown at this stage, but certainly there will be some that have diverted already, and there will be more in the near future.
When you look at the route around... Apologies, Brian, please finish your point.
They will come via the Cape of Good Hope, and it's not necessarily true that a lot of them will call at South African ports, because these days some ships have got rather large fuel capacity and are stored for several months at a time. So they probably will have sufficient stores on board and fuel to reach their destinations. But there probably will be some that do call. A problem in South African ports is, of course, the congestion at Richards Bay and Durban, and also the shortage of bunkers, i.e. ship's fuel. So we may see some difficulties there, but one hopes that people have taken steps to import ship's fuel in quite large quantities in case there's a requirement.
You've touched on my next question somewhat, the issue around capacity and whether the Cape of Good Hope route has enough capacity for the sort of increased traffic that is expected.
The route itself is fine. It's an open route, so there's plenty of space, and we've seen it in two Suez closures in the past, one in 56 to 57 and the other one in 1967 to 1975. So there's plenty of space at sea. It's the ports that have limited space at the moment, and particularly Durban, Richards Bay. Gqeberha and Cape Town do have a little bit of space, but as I said, I'm not sure how many ships will actually want to call. But what the Port Authority hopefully is preparing is a plan to get these diverted ships in and out as quickly as possible, so that the next one can take its place, and therefore keep a smooth flow of shipping. The last thing we need is huge delays, although I'm pretty sure we won't see the massive delays that occurred in those earlier Suez closures, when up to 40 ships were at anchor off Cape Town and Durban on occasions.
And
so,
would there be, pardon me, Brian, would there be any material benefit for the country from this increased maritime traffic?
Oh, yes. If ships just bypass, then there won't be benefit at all. But some ships may need to call, as we call them, off-port limits. In other words, they don't enter the port, but they are, Cape Town's case, for example, they're 7 miles west of Robben Island, and launches or helicopters service them out there. And nevertheless, there might be some South African produce that is ordered terms of food. There could be spares, engine spares and that sort of thing. And there may even be crew changes. And crew changes do bring money to the country, as do the other items as well. But if 3 crew members are signing off and leaving South Africa, obviously they need accommodation perhaps, they need transport and they need air tickets, and then the replacements come in as well. So there is that sort of money, and sometimes significant crew changes occur even now off our ports, and but this is likely to increase. But if ships do come in, then obviously they are purchasing fuel, they're purchasing stores, they're port dues, tugs and pilotage charges, and inevitably there's some little repair job that needs to be done as well. So there will be benefits all round, and the ports, if they can handle any increased traffic, should do quite well out of this. But the important thing is to get the ships in and out very quickly.
And the implication for these companies that have chosen to reroute the movement of their cargo at sea is that it'll take longer. The vessels will spend more days at sea. Will that be passed down ultimately to the people for whom the goods on board are intended?
Oh, yes. If we take a ship coming from Singapore and coming via the Cape instead of Suez, you're looking at another 14 days at sea and perhaps even more depending on her speed. And of course, it might even be that the ship has to put into port to refuel or for machinery repairs. So there certainly is a longer period of time, and that costs money. There's extra fuel. If ships are chartered or hired, then the extra days on charter, and that always costs money as well. So the receivers of the goods, the consignees, are certainly going to have to wait a bit longer for their goods, and those goods could cost them a bit more. In the case of ships trading, say, between Europe and Australia, the difference in distance isn't all that much. So it probably is a wise decision, even now, that ships on that route do use the Cape route rather than Suez, because the time difference is not all that great in terms of the time they'll be at sea. And therefore, the increased costs are not all that great. But that always gets passed on to the consumer. So folks in Europe or Asia will be paying a bit more for imported goods.
Right. Am I right to say, Brian, that it's also a reminder of why the recent conversation about, and you referenced this earlier, the delays at our ports in areas such as Richards Bay, why it's so important for South Africa to sort out that sort of thing, because there's so much dependent, or as far as the world's economy and the movement of goods, that is actually dependent on ports, and there are opportunities, in fact, that this country could even be able to benefit from if our ports functioned optimally.
Yes. The container delays have caught the eye, and particularly imported goods coming in on container ships. Those have caught the eye because obviously Christmas turkeys need to be here by Christmas, and but there's a whole lot of other things come in as well, and the car parts for the number of car assembly plants in South Africa, those have to be delivered in time, otherwise the plant comes to a standstill. So there are all those ramifications of port delays, and the current port delays in Durban, Richards Bay are pretty serious. They will certainly add costs to the landed cost of the goods, and you'll find that some businesses dependent on those imported goods have a problem keeping up production lines. But also it's the exports that are delayed. So somebody exporting goods in containerized cargo, that person is going to have his cargo delayed, and therefore there could be a delay in payment as well. Some of the delays at the ports are not anybody's fault. For example, if you are bringing in grain and it happens to rain, you cannot work that grain, and so there will be a weather-related delay, which I think is understandable, and everybody knows about those. But it's where port machinery breaks down or is unavailable, or the land transport is jammed up either by rail or by truck. then that presents a problem for the for the ports, and it presents a problem for the shippers and for the importers.
Brian Ingpen, really good to speak to you. Thank you so much.